On the podcast today, we'll speak about the importance of ancient cultures, especially in the East, and the danger in losing those cultures due to this one culture we're developing in the world, which is basically Western, according to the digital world and social media and everything like that. So in this respect, you have to actually admire certain places like Bhutan or India. So Bhutan, love him or hate him, the king, he is doing his best to preserve the ancient culture of especially Mahayana Buddhism in Bhutan, and that is why tourism is restricted there. And he understands that a lot of that sort of, let's say, that materialist, empty culture, he doesn't want any of that infiltrating that ancient culture he has and the values, especially in Bhutan, because it's not based on really a gross national product. It's based on gross national happiness. So the happier you are in Bhutan, the better that is for the society. And likewise in India, love him or hate him, but Narendra Modi is doing his best to preserve the Hindu culture. And we need to remember that majority of India is Hindu. So we don't want to get any of our politically correct Western mindset on here, because not everywhere is the same and not everywhere has the same version of secularism as the West. So we don't want to be arrogant or rude here. Everywhere is different. But there's a lot of importance in preserving these ancient cultures, especially because when we look at ourselves as a cultural species, we're not really a natural. We are always going to be a natural species, but we've developed into a cultural species. So when we talk about culture, as you and I know, culture is an accumulative set of knowledge. So language, customs, spirituality.
Everything. It's just everything. We are surrounded by culture, whatever culture, whether that's new or old or good or bad. And culture is culture. We are surrounded by it all the time, from language to the way we dress and what we eat, right? Just everything, basically.
Everything, even back in the ancient times, like even the skill of making tools and stuff like that, that's a culture. That is an accumulative set of knowledge that's passed down from generation to generation, because if you follow that knowledge, that's going to be beneficial for your life. And especially if we look at Eastern spirituality has done a remarkable job to survive for. Well, if we look at Hinduism, who knows how long the tradition has been around. Yeah,
10, 20,000 years ago? Who knows, even longer?
Well, Indians say that, but
right.
But there's an argument there that it goes back at least 5,000 years.
5,000. Okay.
A lot of that knowledge. Even though we could say the mythology of India, so when we talk about the Mahabharata and the Puranas and that came a little bit later, but the actual Vedic tradition, so the Vedas.
I guess we were talking about then the Indus Valley civilization,
yeah, we're talking
right?
about Harappa and
yes, the birth of that Indus Valley civilization that's going back 10 to 15,000 years ago.
Yeah, along those lines.
Yeah.
And so you have an accumulative set of knowledge, and other places around the world do as well. Even here in Australia, right? The Aboriginals have an accumulative set of knowledge that is unfortunately being wiped out a little bit due to colonialization here, and likewise within North America with the native Indians. But there's, we have this set culture for a reason, and the danger in losing it is we're wiping it out according to what we value now. But if that's taken away, we'll instantly revert back to the ancient culture, because that's what has worked, and that's what still does work. I mean, it's like saying, let's give up language. Because that doesn't make sense, right? Language has got us this far. We've got all of these. We've got literature. We can communicate with each other. Everything has been a product in a sense of, especially in the refined aspects of culture, has been an aspect of language and art. So art is another part of the humanities in general, right? Are a big part of culture. So art, science, religion, philosophy.
I think we need to first and foremost address how human species as a cultural species, right? because, like, let's say long time ago, like at a Stone Age time, right? For example, like someone came up with a tool to hunt an animal, right? They need to eat in order to survive, right? And the next generation after that came up with some better tools or many different type of tools to use at different reason, right? So as generation goes on, it becomes accumulative. The culture built around the accumulative skills, and that becomes custom, becomes kind of a thing that from generation to generation it passed down knowledge, right? And that creates the culture. So why so important to bring healthy culture right now is to create the next generation to have a healthier culture, to live in harmony with one another without conflict, right? So that's why it's so important to acknowledge how ancient culture is something that we have to uphold, because obviously it's dying, right? It's dying. Because that since the digital age and information age came into the world, and internet and social media right now is just kind of taken over the world, right? So where do we go from now then? Because what we have now is going to become gateway to the next generation's culture. So what we do now affects next generation and generation after that. So it's such a responsible thing that we need to think about, instead of just following without any critical thoughts about it.
Yeah, we just follow the trends, right, of what's cool in the modern world, and due to especially what's happening on social media, and what people say is trendy, or people submit to things like political correctness, and people are being actually silenced in the modern world, and which stifles critical thinking and stifles new ideas, which is a problem, right? Like, that's a form of tyranny. And so, we've encountered this, especially with this YouTube channel, especially I have, because, the work I've been doing is that for whatever reason, people have a problem, especially in the modern world, of deferring to someone else or trusting a set of knowledge for themselves. You know what I mean? So, for example, if we look at the Eastern traditions, spiritual traditions, and we look at their meditative practices or their philosophy, people, for whatever reason, and this is how the New Age developed, they take it and make it their own. This is what we would call cultural appropriation. This happens a lot especially in America, where they take something like yoga or they take Buddhism and they create their own version of Buddhism. But that's strange, right? Because there's only Buddhism. There's only the Buddhism that arose in Asia. There actually is not an American Buddhism, and probably should not be, because you're not trusting the accumulative set of knowledge that has been set out for thousands of years. And so what it becomes then, it becomes these traditions in the East, which are based on the collective cognition and the holistic part of our mind, the hot cognition, and are interesting to individualistic people in the West who are analytical thinkers. This is just cognitive science. This is the reality, the facts people. And then they mold the tradition according to individualism. And so this is how the New Age spirituality developed, because then they take things like, say they take the chakras, right? And the chakras is an intricate system and science about the bioenergetics of the body, but the psychological evolution of an individual. It's about, these are psychological centers. But what they do is they make their own version of this energy or whatever they're talking about, and then we have this New Age version of chakras. And then they create their own thing based on just the way that they feel it is. And so they're not trusting the accumulative set of knowledge that's been set down to them. And they want to make it their own. And so this is a thing where, especially in the West, where people have a problem with deference, especially according to like say a master or a guru, they don't want to defer to someone who has an accumulative set of knowledge and they have the wisdom. You know, I've encountered this on this channel, right? Like, it doesn't matter whether you think some people say I'm an expert at this stuff and this is what I actually do is Eastern philosophy and spirituality. This is my job. I don't just browse YouTube and find, interesting clips to do. This is my job. And some people have a problem, maybe because of the way I look or whatever, but they don't want to trust me. Only some people, we're talking about a very small percentage. Most people are in general nice people, but there's a small percentage of people who don't want to listen to someone and think that they know something more than others. This is what Devdutt Patnaik said that time, is we live in a world now that don't appreciate the expert. So he's an expert in mythology, right? But he has all of these people who attack him, maybe due to his behavior on Twitter and stuff like this. Whether you regard his behavior on Twitter as good or bad doesn't matter. What is he teaching in mythology? Is that, because that's what he's providing. He's annoyed with people who are coming along who are just Twitter warriors or so forth and so on, who have a political agenda, and attack him accordingly. And that's unfortunately the behavior that's becoming accepted in the world. This online behavior where we,
pretend to be an expert.
And we hide behind the computer and attack people. And this is becoming, unfortunately, the behavior. But people still don't act like that in the real world, because they know if they go up and say something like that, actually they probably wouldn't have the balls to go up to someone like that Patnaik in reality and say anything, because he's very intellectual, he would cleverly shut them down.
He's a super smart scholar.
Scholar, yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine what that does to individuals' psychology? In online, you show such behavior, and like you said, in an offline, in physical, real world.
Yeah, real world. Yeah.
They would just hide away,
yeah.
As if that wasn't them, right?
Yeah.
It's just such.
Yeah.
We are living such a hypocritical world.
Yeah. It's a Confucian world. We're living in a very hypocritical and fake world so to stick to what we're talking about is that behavior is becoming the culture. So you're developing that fake and empty culture where, like you said, it's hypocritical, and the online culture then becomes the world's culture. And that's the problem. See, and you and I have witnessed this, especially because we've lived most of our adult life in Asia. Well, you're Asian, we don't even have to talk about that. But if we look at where you're from, for example, if we look at South Korea, and so since the Korean War, not straight away, but incrementally over the 70 years, this westernization and this encroaching on the ancient culture has happened, right? And, we could blame the Japanese beforehand for some of that, right? Because of, they were controlling Korea at the time. But Korea has gone full blown into this materialist, westernized culture where it's all about looking cool and appearing cool, but no substance inside, right?
Yeah, it has got something to do with the colonization by Japan back in the day.
Yeah.
But I guess that's what triggered Korean people to be rich as quick as possible, and to bring this a strong nation as in economical way, and politically back in those time. And U.S. government came in, and there was two different president candidates, and one's originally from Korea who wanted to have a unified country and whatnot. The other came from U.S. and had an education over in America, and believe it or not, accidentally, the person who originally came from Korea, who was going for unification of the country, got assassinated, and the other one became president. So anyway, the American influence was very, very strong in South Korea. So that, where, like you said, westernization and also industrialization just became so huge back in the 60s. And basically, economy became their, like, kind of god. So that came with everything, like a Western culture and everything. And again, the mind that you really driving towards to become an affluent country, naturally gonna not paying too much attention to ancient culture, right?
Awesome.
So outcome of that is the nation they have now, and they themselves don't know much about the very ancient mythology of Korea. They maybe even young children may know a little bit about it from reading just fairy tale stories and stuff like that. But even there's not enough people who keenly study about that type of stuff, and which is very sad. And that is happening around the world. Same, like we've been to Southeast Asian countries, and this smartphone just took over the world. And I think it's very sad, and it's kind of dangerous thing too. Like I came across to meet some Indonesian people, and we both never been to Indonesia, right? So I was quite curious, like how their culture is like, and how it's like where they come from and things like that. But they're much more addicted to smartphone than anyone else, really. And you kind of look over their shoulder and see what they looking at. It's the same thing, Facebook, Twitter, and this kind of things. And I was very disappointed, seriously. And their conversation was no different from any other people who were from here, you know.
I remember Vanilla Ice. I'm dating myself a little bit here, but the rapper Vanilla Ice said to Patrick Bet-David in a podcast, because he was famous in the 90s, right? And he had that, especially that one fame. He was almost like a one-hit wonder. I shouldn't say that, but Ice Ice Baby. And back in the 90s, as you know, there was a particular culture in the West, and it was kind of like this hip, cool culture. People wore, certain clothes. It was funky, It was kind of an evolution from the 80s and the 70s, and so it was a natural progression. And then Vanilla Ice said to Patrick Bet-David, he said, "Haven't you found it interesting since the year 2000? He's talking about Western culture. Western culture hasn't really, hasn't evolved in a sense." And he was saying that because the culture's become online, it's become computers, it's become smartphones. That's the culture, and he's kind of a little bit anti that. And I can sympathize. We can both sympathize with that. And that's becoming the culture, right? And so whatever's cool on there, that's what people do. If people behave a certain way online, they behave like that they want to behave like that offline, if there's political correctness on there, they start to behave like that, even if they don't agree with that, you know what I mean? And in regards to Korea, if we look at Korea, right? So Korea, it's interesting when I've been there with you in Korea and observed the way people are and your family. And so, for example, and we spoke about this on the podcast before, so the ancient traditions of, say, Neo-Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism, even though they are still in Korea, but they've so that almost like taboo, and they're almost like in the background. It's like people in Korea think that they are Saibi, you know what I mean? That they are not, but only real special people, and I mean special in the worst possible way, practice these traditions. And what's ironic in Korea is that, and we know this with your family, is that if you go to church and you follow Catholicism, that's okay. And it's but that's a foreign product. Yeah. That's a European religion. That's a white man's religion.
That religion just arrived late 1800 in Korea.
Yeah.
So where is all the Buddhism, Taoism, Neo-Confucianism that's been around for hundreds of thousands of years?
Yeah.
That's just been forgotten, obviously, long gone.
But it's strange, right? Because for example, Christianity have always tried to get their feet into India, and they have a little bit, but they've got no chance because of how vast the Hindu tradition and also Islam are in India. But in Korea, it was like a wholesale. Like we'll just sell every. It was a garage sale. Everything's got to go. Everything has to go.
I don't know if it's anything to do with the specific characteristics of the Korean people. As you may have recognized it, Koreans are a little bit gullible people. Like they would believe anything. Like, and that is why there are quite a lot of people who following the fundamental Christianity and became really kind of side B sort of followers. And there are minority of people who do practice Korean traditional martial arts and study Korean philosophy and whatnot. But that itself became somewhat like twisted in a interesting way, so that not quite authentic.
And New Agey, maybe something.
New Agey and a little bit Saibi-like, like they fully seem to get brainwashed by it, and so it's kind of, I don't know why it turned out that way. It's just a weird mix.
And for the listeners and people who are watching, how would we translate Saibi? Like Saibi is a Korean word. Saibi. It was kind of like cringy, new agey. How would you translate that? Evangelical.
Evangelical, yes. I think that's more precise, and also fully been brainwashed. Brainwashed and fully.
Like the people in the church in Korea, like doing these
like
ones.
almost like hypnotized by the ideology, the agenda of that organization. And I think, I don't know why we are pretty gullible people. I think that is why I think they just like really gung-ho with the Western culture too. They just fully embracing it, and that is the way to go. And if you work for the big name company for America, you're successful, like, and that's to show as like as a god, like.
Well, one thing that, you know this, you've shown me over the years, like you'll show me some K-pop and then you'll show me traditional Korean music, and it's night and day. Do you know what I mean? Like what feels natural when a Korean's playing music is the natural music. So when you see the Korean instruments and the way that the older style of singing and so forth and so on, it's so natural. But then when you see K-pop, where their nose has been operated on, their eyes have been widened, and they got makeup, the dust is just flying off them with makeup, and they're trying to sing like a Western person and making these songs like that. It doesn't feel natural, And same in India, right? Like when you see a lot of that pop style music in India, but then when you hear kirtans or bhajans and that in India, and you hear the sacred words spoken, there's a naturalness to that feels genuine with the people, So, for example, like K-pop music is based on pop music, right? So, Western pop music. So, if let's look at some so-called pop music. If we go back a little bit in time, like Elton John, Phil Collins, these guys, Sting, Queen, all of these amazing musicians that were probably termed pop music back then, but if we listen to their music now, it's way beyond whatever this. I don't know what this sort of music is getting created these days, but like that is genuine to that culture, right. And most of them were British, so that was genuine to those British fellows that I mentioned, and so it feels genuine, and that's for them. It's not for Koreans.
That's right. And when you listen to those songs back in those days, it's all reflected on what was really happening around that time, exactly. Right? So that's why when we listen now, like, you can reminisce on what really happened back in those days. So that's purely reflected on what was happening at that moment. That is why the music was so authentic. And first and foremost, they're using their instruments and their own voice and like whatnot. So it's much more real.
And I think that that's a good point, because the art itself is supposed to be a reflection of the environment you're in.
That's right.
And I think why, say for example, K-pop doesn't seem genuine is because it's not a reflection of the environment. It's trying to just copy a style and create music. Whereas, let's say, Queen, they were writing music which was a reflection of the environment that they were in, you know?
Yeah. Yes, you know, I've played a couple of different Korean traditional instruments.
Yeah.
And I spent quite some time playing those instruments and being in the environment where I could perform and have a regular practice with other people and things like that. And I remember, like, anybody who plays music or listen to music, you feel, have a sense of like a feel of the being alive. Like your spirit is awoken and awake, and you feel fully alive, and you feel you're completely present, and you feel the music, and you playing the instrument. And when I played those traditional instruments, I could understand somewhat from the sound of it itself. I could understand more authentic culture of Korea, because those instruments, I don't really know how old they are, because it's been played for ages, forever. Who knows? And all those sounds has the emotions that traditional Korean culture has, and all these things. So that brings about the authentic traditions and also the emotion of the land. And that's not something that you can imitate even with any Western instrument.
No.
You know, because Western instrument came from the West.
West, of course,
right?
yeah.
So that's something like we need to really think about.
Well, something like the Gaia Gim that you do play, that's, again, an accumulative set of knowledge that's came down through Korean culture, right? Like that. I mean, people may think that the instrument is somewhat simplistic, but it's not really. And it's not that easy to play, right? It looks easy to play from by sight, but it's not, right? Because you were trained in a Gaia Gim how to play, and that's again an accumulative set of knowledge, and that's why, like, for example, violin and piano and all that's an accumulative set of knowledge on the other spectrum of the board, right? Like, because that's what culture does. Culture, the differences in culture provide different things. This is why, and this is an important thing about having different cultures, is variety is the spice of life. And people don't understand that variety is the spice of life, see? You can't make a good curry without a variety of spices, right? If you just chuck in turmeric, it's going to be one hell of a curry. You know,
just bitter and strong.
You need to have cumin, you need to have cinnamon, you need to have all of these other spices that...
Even the tea that we're drinking.
It's a masala chai, right?
Yeah.
So masala is a variety of spices that makes a party in your mouth.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what
That's
I mean?
Exactly right.
So that's... And I think... And people don't understand this, is that diversity actually makes us more unified in a roundabout sense. Having diverse cultures allows us to understand each other better, and it actually makes life more alive. It's like when people say, for example, when people travel to India, and then they just completely transform when they leave India, because they're just like, it was just the greatest time of my life. Like, just things are alive in India. Like, there's an energy. It's like what Sadhguru said, when you get off the plane in India, even if you're trying to avoid spirituality, it just hits you in the face like a brick. Because it's just everywhere. You know what I mean? It's everywhere. So, like, you can't avoid it. Like, there's a temple for Shiva and Vishnu on just everywhere, on every street corner.
It's really real, because get out of an airport, you just walk out like not even like 100 meters. It's just the babas, gurus with the saffron color clothes, and then asking for something.
Bakshish.
That is so true. Yeah, that is right.
It's everywhere, and there's that's an aliveness, right?
Yeah.
And you know, you get out of a plane in Australia here, and you don't have that same feeling. Though they're different places, of course, but having that rich culture brings so much to life. And one of the main reasons you and I speak about these topics and why I actually have been teaching Eastern philosophy and spirituality for over 10 years is because of India, to be honest with you, from living in India and learning the philosophies and this and that, and how that has benefited my life and our life, you know.
I was a little bit apprehensive before we decided to go to India, because I've been there before you went there. So just because I've met quite large amount of people who really just hated India, absolutely just hated. So I was a bit worried that if you don't like it, but it's good that you really just fell in love with it.
Yeah, of course. So. Yeah. Well, it's like, you know, as you know me, like I'm not very, what do you say, like very super analytical and
far from it
and more playful. So people probably don't pick that up on the podcast and when they're watching or listening, but as you know me in real life, very playful. So when we go to and I just like having fun. So India's a perfect place, right? It's just play. It's like what Sadhguru was mentioning about Krishna the other day, and he was saying that, you know, Krishna is kind of a symbol of for people who don't take life too serious. So Krishna is like, so Indian spirituality is about, you know, like, because there's a seriousness in life, right, with some people. And it's not that, say, for example, if we look at Sanatana Dharma, or if we look at Hinduism, it's not that the people are not, they are serious about certain elements of it, but it's a playful joy in understanding Brahman. You know, there's a playful joy. And you don't have to be like, because, you know, Krishna himself symbolizes kind of a playful God, right? And so being a representative of Vishnu. And so there's a playfulness about life, and that's your path to Brahman, about, you know, the unification of Atman and Brahman. It's not so much in being super serious and you know, like being a stick in the mud, you know.
And I think that culture creates that healthy psychology, healthy mind of people, yes. Right? We witnessed how many times really, like just local people get into a fight. You know, they fight.
Oh, yeah.
They gotta see the blood. They're just on full fist fight, right?
Yeah.
But then like a few hours later, like normal, back to normal.
Back to normal, yeah.
Like it's kind of, I mean, we talked about this, like just like how dogs behave. Dog psychology.
Yeah. There's they don't retain a lot of prejudice in their memory.
And those emotions don't stick to their mind,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And they easily just let it go and just forget about it and just get on with the business.
They haven't tried.
That's right, later, because you know? They one another, they're never gonna. I mean, in the circumstance may change, but it's not that they're never gonna see each other again.
No,
if it was
not,
like a neighborhood or something.
Yeah.
So, I feel that that traditional culture of India bring the healthy emotional state and the healthy mind and psychologically healthy, so that brings people together. In harmony, and that is why that enduring communal feel wherever you go, really, like it's literally wherever you go, anywhere, any pockets of places in India you go, you would feel the same, that communal feel that's just going through everywhere.
Yes.
And you never feel not belong. You always feel welcomed, and again, like. They just have no like prejudice or discrimination or nothing like that.
No.
And again, lots of Indian restaurants, their thing is that like guest is God, right? So when you enter the country, it's like that. You're a visitor, and they just want to welcome you, and they just want to help you. And yeah, it's just that strong culture, the culture that binds everybody come together.
Yes. Well, it's interesting because in a place like India, because of that accumulative set of values and culture and that sense of community, the they don't have a strong sense. They don't have like racial bias. They're not racist. Like for example, like there's Asian people everywhere. There's African people everywhere in India. There's white people. There's American people everywhere. And it's interesting because they don't have that ingrained racial perspective because of their culture. First of all, because their understanding is, and I'm talking about the majority of India here, their understanding is that everyone is Hindu, and essentially, because everyone's part of Brahman, right? Everyone's part of Brahman. There's no, and we're all on our own spiritual path, and Brahman here being the ultimate reality, not a god, not a created god, the actual ultimate reality, that which is eminent in life and that which is beyond life, beyond the manifest and the unmanifest. And so we're all a part of that. And so they don't have this bias. Like, of course, everyone in India has black skin, but they don't see other people as different, which is quite amazing. There's a lot of countries that don't see each other like that. But so it's very welcoming, right? So you're Asian. I have my ancestry is Scottish and Danish, and so but that doesn't exist. Like when you're there, like for example, first time ever in India, if you remember, sitting on Sutter Street in Calcutta, enjoying a chai, having some cheap Korean food on the side of the road, and then a couple of guys are just staring at me, and I'm like, oh, well, this is India, you know what I mean? Like, and then there's a couple of Bangladeshi guys, and I'm saying Bangladesh here, that whole South India region was once one, we need to remember, the Great Bharat. And then they wanted a photo, we took a photo and everything like that, and then 5 minutes later, an Indian fella enjoying chai with us is asking us for dinner. And there's no like, and that's a wonderful thing about the collective cognition. You see, there's no filter, as if like, that gentleman didn't know us, right? You and I could have been terrible people, and he's asking us for dinner. We could go over there, and if we were like a bit sick in the mind, rob his money or cause drama. But he doesn't have that feeling. He's just like, welcome. Like, it's like India, in the tradition, guest is God. And that's a big part of Indian culture, guest as God. So when they see foreigners in India, they're chomping at the bit. Hey, you're coming for dinner tonight. You don't even have a say in it. It's like, oh, I guess so. Like,
I remember that moment with those Bangladeshi guys who wanted to take picture with you. First time, they were young people, do you remember?
Yeah,
like maybe 20 or something like that. First time ever they got out of Bangladesh. And you were the first person they've ever witnessed as a white-skinned person.
Yeah, like seeing an alien or something.
Yes. That is why they just couldn't help themselves. Yeah. I remember that they were so excited. They're just so excited to see you and take a picture with you and having a conversation briefly. But that was so innocent and so pure, just pure intention. And that Indian gentleman who offered us for dinner at his place, he was just so excited to bring guests from overseas come to his place and share a meal with his family. That was something else. And again, another example, when I was, this is like, let's say 10 years ago, when we were down in Sydney, I was working for this company. I come to meet this cleaner gentleman, and he seemed like a Indian Nepalese type of nationality, I could say. And then we got to say hello and whatnot, and he happened to be a Nepalese and came from Jiri in the Kathmandu Valley, and we got into good conversation. And I said, I've been to Nepal many times. I love the country and beautiful people and whatnot. And that was really it. And a few days later,
I remember
his wife cooked the full Nepali meal for me
Oh, yeah, I know. It
to
breaks-
share with you.
Yeah.
You had to have this food what my wife cooked last night, and I thought to bring for you, and you can share with your husband. I'm like, I've known you only a few days, like, and and he didn't expect anything back from me.
No, of course not.
And I mean, a few weeks later, I think he moved on to somewhere else and didn't even get to say goodbye. But yeah, they're just amazing, amazing people.
Breaks your heart, when you hear that.
Like, would you do that? Like, you know, like,
But that's that sense of, even outside of Nepal, they have that sense of community. You know what I mean? Like, and for them, and you and I know this because we know a lot of Nepalese and Indians, Bangladeshis and Pakistanis in Australia, for example, and they do it tough here because there is not that sense of community, and people are self-interested, and that actually there's nothing wrong with that. That's the Western cognition, but for them personally, because it runs counter to their culture, it's different. Like the thing is, like in Asia, for example, communal eating is so common, right? So if you go from the Middle East all the way to Taiwan, you analyze the vast gamut of Asia, communal eating is very popular. You all sit on the floor, you all share a meal. There's not individual plates, and so forth and so on. Like, and it's just so common. Obviously, if you go out and you eat at a restaurant, that's different. But I'm talking here about home life here,
Yeah.
and so, and for that cleaner fella, that was like him having a communal meal with you. His wife made I remember it was a really delicious,
like authentic,
like dal bhat, and we enjoyed that thoroughly. You know what I mean? And I wish we had the chance to thank him, or at least invite them over. But he moved on. But that's the richness of the culture. See, the richness of that collective, especially Eastern spiritual traditions, is the understanding that we're all part of something much greater than ourselves, and all of these opinions and beliefs that we have that run counter to each other. You can just put that to the side and just be a human for once in your life.
That's right.
And in the West, we're developing this idiotic culture where everyone has their own personal opinion and they're way too self-interested, and we're not listening to each other. And this, unfortunately, because this is getting superimposed into the online world, this is infecting the mind of Asian people. And this is terrible, you know what I mean? Because I would like to tell them that you should not be looking up to... Just because you see Westerners with a lot of money and cars and houses and they look cool or whatever, that doesn't mean that it's right. And that doesn't mean that those people are happy or content, because in most cases they're not. Of course, a little bit of wealth helps because you can afford food for your family and so forth and so on. But you don't want to go and sell the whole farm just to go and get this little slice of heaven that you perceive.
The extreme individualism that we are having and driving to right now has got nothing to do with to survive in the social world.
No.
That's a little bit too far.
Too far.
It's unnecessary. It's unnecessary culture that we are developing, and
because Western individualism is a lot more intense now than it used to be. If you look through time, it wasn't that intense. There were communal. The West did have an understanding of communal values and about helping one another, but that's just being sold because we've kind of regressed into this super survival mentality where it's me against everyone else, and I've got to get my slice of the pie or else. There's like a fear there that if I don't get my slice of the pie, then I might die. And you and I know that, for example, in India, you could go to India with no money You'd never miss a meal. You'd never miss a meal. Someone would see you and, hey man, here's a tea, here's a dal bhat, a thali, and get into it.
You literally won't miss a meal.
You won't miss a meal.
Really?
You could go there with $0 and you wouldn't miss
Just
a meal.
go into ashram or temples.
Oh, yeah.
They give you free food.
You
Literally.
you could live on Pradakshina Road at the foot of Arunachala and just go to the ashram every day and just get a good dal bhat every day. Set.
Dal and rice or dal and chapati or whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
But you might be much happier, much healthier.
Have you seen the sadhus? They got a smile that you can't...
In pure bliss.
Pure bliss. And you can't get that from eating KFC 3 times a day. You might have a lot more problems than just your contentment. You might have a heart problem, but you know. But that's the beauty of that accumulative set of cultural values, and we're even in the East, they're selling it for this online world, and it's very dangerous because you essentially have, and the hallmark, one of the hallmarks of the collective cognition is these intrinsic spiritual values, right? So you have humility is a key part, deference, innocence. These are not even things that people have to do. Respect, honor. These things are not even things that they don't even have to try to do. It's just part of the psychology. So, like I mentioned deference before, deference to someone with higher knowledge, it's just common. They have more knowledge than me. I should sit down and listen. That's it. It's not like, there's no like humiliation in that. They have more knowledge than me. I need to listen. That's it. But in the West, we never want to defer to others, and we're like, what does she or he know?
I think in Westerners were never like that, though. It just lasts a few decades. It became like that.
Yeah, it's been intensified. Yeah.
Yeah, because now anyone can have, let's say, any of the social media account, right? And they can become someone who influence other people, whether with what they influence with, whether that's healthy or unhealthy. Whatever you influence people with gets a lot more attention. Then some reason that individual gets a lot of credit. Even that's unhealthy influence. You know what I mean?
Of course.
So that is really, death of real expert here. Like, if you have a lot of followers and all these social media, and somehow that make you to be a somebody.
And you're not nobody.
I don't understand it. And as we all know, how many these pretend to be guru, pretend to be spiritual person on social media platforms and like trying to influence people with the wrong perspective on things, wrong knowledge. And that's extremely dangerous.
And that's not actually the real culture. That's cultural appropriation. That's they're faking it to get followers and so forth and so on. As you and I, as we both know, it's frustrating, especially for myself, when people present themselves as a teacher and they're teaching fake, especially Eastern knowledge. Like you see, a lot of people are interested in Taoism on my channel, right? And then you see a lot of fake New Age Taoism that teachers, in air quotes, are teaching people. And then this Taoism that they're teaching them has nothing to do with how Taoism is a critique of Confucianism. It doesn't teach about all of these things that are Taoist. It doesn't teach the Zhuangzi text. They might teach a version of the Tao Te Ching, which it becomes very airy-fairy, and it's not a real translation of the Tao Te Ching. And then they're considered teachers and they have a lot of followers because they are politically correct and they are just making people feel better. It's like a feel-good spirituality. And that's not the way it is. And as everyone knows from listening to me and watching myself and all my videos, is that I'm not politically correct because Eastern spirituality itself is politically incorrect. It doesn't run according to the social trends. It doesn't.
It's got nothing to do with what's trending right now.
What's trending right now, exactly. It has nothing to do with it. It's an ancient system that is designed to make you healthy and sane. That's what the spiritual traditions are. And when you become healthy and sane, then you can aspire to liberation and all of these other higher aspects of the tradition. And so that's the problem. See, that, like you said, just because someone is a teacher and they have millions of followers on Instagram, people think that they're expert, but they're teaching people incorrect knowledge. It's feel-good spirituality. You know, it's like for example, the podcast that you and I did on why morality is immoral. That triggered so many people because people are like, oh, now you're against morality. It's like, oh, they completely missed the point of the podcast. You know, they didn't, and also they didn't listen. See, one of the problems with the online world, people don't listen to something thoroughly, and they just judge a book by its cover, which is obviously an incorrect way, and actually a sense of psychopathy is going on in the mind when people behave like that, especially because you're speaking to a stranger in a negative manner, and we should never speak to strangers in a negative manner. We should behave ourselves and act nice towards each other, even on the online world. There should be no differentiation.
You wouldn't be like that if it was offline, would you?
Of course not.
Oh, you're wearing Batman shirt.
Yeah, to give context to that, someone had a problem with me wearing a Batman shirt, and it's like, I only own 3 shirts, so if you have a problem with my level of wealth, then buy me a shirt and send me a shirt. I only have an Indian shirt, Nepali shirt, and a Batman shirt. And again, see the focus on materialism, focusing on the shirt that I'm wearing, but not the knowledge that you and I are speaking about.
Exactly.
And not to mention, I've had this shirt since 2015.
Yeah. And it's fine, still just new.
Good material.
Yeah.
Thais, they know how to make. They know how to make shirts and stuff. But do you see, like, the focus is not the knowledge. The focus, see, that's a new age response. They see Batman, and see, so their perspective of spirituality is someone like, and wearing like all pure white clothes and
put the sarong on top.
Yeah. And so that's not Eastern spirituality or philosophy. That may be your perspective from an Abrahamic view, but Eastern spirituality and philosophy is politically incorrect and human. It's not trying to dress it up and fake it. You see, it's not a hypocritical path. It's not about falsity and hypocrisy. It's about honesty, truth, humility, respect, honor. It's not about putting on a show. And so me wearing a Batman shirt, if that triggers you, that's about you, not about me. This is just a piece of clothing. Next week I could wear my Nepal shirt. It depends on what wash cycle I'm on. I mean, seriously, people, don't write those sorts of comments, because that shows a certain level of psychopathy. And so why I mentioned earlier, like the intrinsic characteristics of Eastern spirituality, like, you know, respect, honor, humility, trust, innocence, is because with the online culture, as we are seeing, is they are being destroyed wholeheartedly. They're all going out the window. And what we've seen, especially in developed countries, not just Western countries, but also in Korea and Japan and China and places like these, is that innocence doesn't have any value and it gets sold out the door. And there's a few reasons for this. One of the main reasons is that when you have a culture that's so informational based, and you're basing your whole education system on just accumulating a lot of knowledge and so forth and so on, without having the playfulness and experience in life and remaining humble and this and that, is you lose your innocence. And this has been a psychological study for a long time. You know, why in people gaining a lot of information do they lose their innocence? Or what, and even in another perspective, what happens to people when they become more affluent, that they begin to lose their innocence as well, and they stop being so humble and they lose respect for other people and they become so opinionated. And this is what's happening, right? Especially with the online world, and this is what's happened, unfortunately, in the West. And like what you mentioned earlier, it's only happened, you know, recently, not too recently in the West, but, you know, the last few hundred years, where people essentially have lost their innocence. And it's according to having too much knowledge. Like you said, a lack of appreciation for the expert, a lack of ability to defer to other people.
Yeah, I don't know why, but like around the world, things became much more competitive. Whatever you do is just so competitive. And to survive in the competition, you can't be too nice, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that's how you lose respect and innocence, isn't it? Like,
So self-interested. It's like you're in the savannah still and you're like a lion chasing a gazelle. This is the mentality, right? Like, so of course I'm not going to be innocent. I need to get ahead.
but that's literally how the mentality is. Like how the animal, when they hunt for gazelle, that's the mentality. And that is kind of like majority, unfortunately.
Yeah, so-
And as you know, over in Asia, the sad thing is that the age coming even like lower and lower, age by like 7, they already know everything. They think they know everything.
They think they know everything, yeah.
And they already know that the game of competition and the winning the competition is their thing, their drive at that age. So it's very sad thing. So from that reason, that people, the emotional center became very out of balance, and emotionally not healthy. And they don't feel any empathy towards someone, right? And they're emotionally very dull.
Yeah. That innocence is so important because that innocence keeps you humble and allows you to listen to other people, and you know in your heart of hearts that you don't know everything. But because of the online world, right, we're developing a culture where, like you said, like at 7 they know everything. It's like when Sadhguru was asked about like high school students, and he said, don't speak to a 15-year-old. They know everything already. Like, but again, they're the jack of all trades and the master of none. And see, the online world gives you this illusion of knowing things, right? So, for example, if you look at Wikipedia, you can type in anything, right? And you will find something on Wikipedia about almost everything. Now, people probably don't know this. The way that Wikipedia operates is that anyone can edit it and anyone can put whatever they want on Wikipedia.
You can make your own encyclopedia about yourself.
About yourself.
If you like.
If you like, yeah. And it doesn't mean that it's the truth. Some people have written to me over the decade that I've been doing this, and I've said, yeah, but what you said here on Wikipedia, it says this. And then I don't ever look at Wikipedia because I actually read the text and I actually do the knowledge and I speak to the scholars and I speak to the masters. So I thought, okay, so I started looking at what some of these people would say. And it's obviously just been edited by someone to uphold someone's viewpoint about a particular thing, but it's not, if you read the text don't say that at all. So someone just made it up.
It's subjective. It's up to you to judge.
Yeah, they've interpreted it their own way and put that down, and it's like, that's not the way it is. That's what leads into New Age spirituality. See, New Age spirituality is a subjective perspective of the traditions from their own perspective. It hasn't been passed down and it hasn't been explained to them correctly. And that's a big problem, right? Because if you don't explain it to someone correctly, and that was one of the things, remember that one of the impulses for me to create this channel was to explain the traditional knowledge correctly so people don't fall into New Age traps and they don't fall into those sorts of things.
Yeah, those sorts of people don't understand what kind of responsibility they're carrying, obviously, because they themselves want to have followers and they want somewhat little bit of fame and whatnot all that, and they just give almost somewhat like a knowledge what most people want to hear. That's what they're giving, right? Whereas real Eastern tradition and wisdom tradition is to sometimes hard truth that you need to swallow. Sometimes you have to face yourself and look yourself at very clear eyes and being honest with yourself and going through some mud, You need those times. But in New Age spirituality, you don't see anything like that. Like you create your own reality, law of attraction, and whatnot, and that type of things, and it's all like that. They want to hear that sort of stuff because that only contributes to their materialism, their ego, their extreme individualism.
Exactly.
It doesn't contribute to anything, really.
It's like that dialogue between a Buddhist master and some students in the UK. And because they come from Western culture, they have a problem with reincarnation and karma, right? And so they asked the master, can't we practice Buddhism without, the tenets of reincarnation and karma?
Right.
And he's like, that's not Buddhism. I mean, you can try to practice it without those, but that's not Buddhism. You need to accept the set of knowledge as it is,
Right.
for it to work. You can't, it's like going to buy a Ferrari and taking the engine out of the Ferrari and putting the Jeep's engine in there and thinking that it's going to run like a Ferrari. It isn't. The reason why that set of knowledge is set and has been that way for thousands of years is because it works. And actually, when you understand the philosophy of Buddhism, for example, it would actually be difficult to teach that without karma and reincarnation. It doesn't make any sense, actually. Especially because all of the Indic religions are based on that. And that was one of the problems, that is one of the problems that a lot of Westerners have with yoga. Because when they come across yoga, they think yoga is just hatha yoga. But then when they understand the teachings of Patanjali, then they realize that, I don't know, because karma and reincarnation are part of this tradition. Of course it is. It's an Indic tradition. This is what it's based on. This is the accumulative set of knowledge, the cultural knowledge that works and has worked for thousands of years. And you're trying to throw that away in one generation because you don't think it works. So you're going to discount thousands and thousands of years of accumulative set of knowledge that works because your perspective of karma and reincarnation doesn't suit your Christian way of thinking. And that's what that Buddhist master pointed out. He actually said, you guys are influenced by Abrahamic traditions. That's why you can't accept this but they were saying, yeah, but we're atheists and that. And he's like, but you're still influenced by it. Doesn't matter you're atheist. Your thinking and your cognition is based on that there's one life. And so you're not accepting that. You're not accepting this cultural accumulative set of knowledge. If say, for example, if they were innocent, so as you know, like, breaks your heart when you go to India and in Nepal and Bangladesh and these places and you see the innocence of people, they know that it's an accumulative set of knowledge, so they accept it without their own subjective judgments superimposed onto it. They may not believe in reincarnation, but because
they don't question it at all.
They didn't question it at all.
Right.
They see that, well, this has worked for everyone else beforehand. Who am I to say that I should change it? Because I am no one, really. Like, even as great as I think my knowledge is, who am I to come along and say, I should change this? And that's a beautiful aspect of innocence, right? And then a lot of people listening and watching right now will some people probably be triggered by that and probably start trolling already and say, oh yeah, but that can lead people, and that can be tyrannical and this and that. That's beside the point. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about...
It's not political. It's got nothing to do with politics.
It's got nothing to do with politics. We're talking about intrinsic human values here and Eastern spirituality and philosophy. Stop making things about politics. That's not what it's about. Eastern spirituality and philosophy has nothing to do with politics. It's about following the way of nature. It's about reaching Brahman or Tao in your life, abiding in that.
Those set of cumulative knowledge has been long before when the politics came to birth.
Politics is a new game in town.
It's people too short-sighted.
Too short-sighted. And people are focused too much on politics. And that's why their spirituality doesn't work. That's what I find strange when I read the comments on YouTube. 99% of comments are great, wonderful. People are...
Oh yeah, definitely.
People are on the path.
Really few and far
between.
between.
And they appreciate what I've been doing and what we are doing on this podcast. But there's a small percentage that are still focused just on politics. And so your spirituality is not going to work. And see, that's one of the beautiful mentalities in the East, is they know that spirituality itself is almost it goes beyond conventional thinking. It goes beyond it supersedes all that, yeah. Sorry, what were you going to say, Laura?
No, and I mean, before you come to any ancient wisdom tradition, you need to wipe out everything that you know.
Exactly.
You need to, like, I think one of the chapters in Tao Te Ching says something like this. You need to make everything known unknown.
Yeah.
Like, you need to just wipe out everything because it come from completely different angle and came from it's a prehistoric time. And it's very, very far from the civilization that we have now. So you need to have a little bit of a bigger perspective before you come into this sort of knowledge. And again, that requires you to be humble and innocent and respect those ancient knowledge, right? And that sort of a virtuous behavior and thinking is so necessary. And well, again, that is why anyone who want to get into Zen training for like how long? 3 to 5 years? What do? Sweeping the floor?
Sweeping the floor, yeah.
Cooking food for all the monks. And wipe the cleaning and just washing dishes.
Teaches you to be humble.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
like in Theravada training in the forest tradition. Some of the monks will clean the toilet
for
hand and rug in the water, and it's like, wow. Like there's so many things that you could say about that, but what is it teaching? It's teaching humility.
Yep.
It's teaching humility.
Yep.
You can come here with your moralist cap on and say, oh, but it's unhygienic and this and that. Okay, just don't be a Theravada monk. It's fine. You don't have to be.
Yeah, you don't have to be.
It's teaching you to be humble.
Yep.
Like you said with Zen training. It's teaching you to continually defer to the master and keep things simple, which keeps your mind humble. It doesn't allow you to get too far ahead of yourself. It keeps your innocence. Hence, their eyes start to glow. There's a different look in the eye to someone who is very intellectual and calculated and out for themselves. There's a different look in their eye too.
Yeah.
And we all know that look.
I mean, for me personally, like I feel sometimes very difficult to be around some people that, because we are emotionally quite sensitive, we would just get touched by anything, like just watching highlights in sport and back in the day, we just get touched by it. Like, so emotionally somewhat sensitive, but some people nowadays seem to be very like insensitive towards maybe their own emotion and also what's happening outside. That could be pure ignorance, I don't know, or they just don't feel anything. But all they're interested in is something very dense, like a superficial, and just something that you can physically touch, or so just things that basically related to materials. And that's all they're interested. And when they talk about that, and also video games, computer games. Yeah, when they talk about these things, they seem very passionate, like very like into it. And like, oh, okay, like, if I were to be around that kind of conversation, I would just, not to be rude. But honestly, I don't get interested in at all, because it's got nothing to do with life in general. It doesn't make me intrinsically happy at all. And that's not something that you would really pay attention to. I don't know. So I feel that people losing that sensibility and emotional state, that definitely also links to, losing innocence.
Well, they speak about it in the East of a clean emotional center. So we have an emotional center, right, in our being, and it has to be a clean emotional center. What happens is, because of what you said, because of people get attracted to a dense reality, a materialistic reality, a self-interested reality, a world of only forms, then the emotional aspect of your being gets suppressed. And that's where we lack empathy for other people. We lack all of those intrinsic values, you know. So you crying about anything is actually a good thing, you know. Like me the other day when I heard Dean Jones had died, a famous cricketer, Australian cricketer, I cried because I remembered, especially back to my youth, back when in the early 90s and that, and he gave me a lot of joy, the guy, you know what I mean? And I haven't paid attention to what he had been doing recently because life goes on, right? But, you know, there's a bond there, you know, even though it's not, I didn't know him personally, but so it's emotional, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? So someone else would probably look at me and go, what are you crying about? You know what I mean? but that's what a clean emotional center is. It's an ability to feel that reality that's there, like the reality underneath that,
Right.
not the superficial, not just that someone had died, but like what that individual had given the world. You know, like you're feeling a more subtle reality. That's what's happening when you have a clean emotional center. And when you're focused on the external world a lot and materialism and gain, and you are destroying your innocence, is that you lose sight of that subtle reality, the sense, the feeling of that subtle reality.
And I think another thing is that like people who are materialistically driven, they may have a laugh, a joke or something, but there is no joy in it. It just maybe more so to do with arrogance and laughing at somebody else, or
at the expense of others.
Yeah, it's more like that, undermining other people, that type of thing.
Yes.
But from clean emotional state, you could have a good laugh, and that laugh is joyful. There's that pure joy in. And we experience this when we play music, when we do any kind of artistic or creative work, like for you writing, for someone painting. There's a pure element of joy. And you can only experience that when you have a clean emotional center.
100%, 100%. And that's what, actually, the irony is, especially with spiritual practice, is when you go deep into meditation or even when you study the Eastern traditions, it doesn't matter if you don't want a clean emotional center, you'll start to gain a clean emotional center. If you're following the tradition properly, if you are being humble, if you are, you know, you are keeping your innocence intact, and you're not, you know, accumulating all of this external noise and information. One of the problems with that this new culture is producing, which lends into the loss of innocence, is that, like what we said before about politics and this and that, the online culture, right, becomes a drama-fueled culture. And so what happens when you have a drama-fueled culture? You lose your innocence, right? Like, because what becomes popular online? And this is where companies like YouTube and that actually are not in service to humanity, because they're making things in the algorithm that are drama. And I know that people, in some sense, because of negativity bias, are looking for drama. But in general, I don't think people, because it doesn't serve people, right? Drama doesn't serve people. Conflict doesn't serve people. They intrinsically don't want that. They want that because, in some sense, they want to release from the life that they're living. You know, it makes them feel better about their own lives. But they don't need that, actually. And so this is where part of the loss of innocence and the lack of humility in this comes from, is especially in the modern culture. Because if we're looking at modern culture is becoming social media. So modern culture is becoming Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and so forth and so on. And so what's popular on there is drama, is conflict. And so then some innocent individual in Sudan who's completely disconnected from a drama in Texas is absorbing it the same as someone who is in Texas. They're absorbing it the same, and it's influencing them, and it's making them a certain way. But it has nothing to do with their immediate culture and environment around them.
It's a very good point. Earlier you mentioned that social media, online is our culture, what's driving the culture of modern day, not outside. We are not experiencing the culture, right? And also, that's also to do with how we observe immense amount of Hollywood films.
Yes.
How Hollywood Hollywood drives the world culture, I think.
Yes.
And it's been happening since the birth of Hollywood,
Yep.
I think. And like you mentioned, someone in India or just completely the opposite side of the planet watch the movies and the things from Hollywood, and they take fully on board. But their immediate environment is completely the opposite or just completely different. And what does that do? Like, what does that do to those people who are living in different environment but absorbing completely westernized culture? And what does that do in their immediate community and society? And that basically, from people consuming the Hollywood culture, they're kind of abandoning their own culture, right? And that's what's happening for us in Asian country, China, Japan, Korea, Taiwan.
Exactly. Yeah.
They look down at their own culture and just laugh at it. And they're fully absorbed and fully on board with the fully westernized culture. And that just doesn't seem right.
It's not right. It's not right. You make a great point, because it is the Hollywoodization of culture. It's how many people probably listening and watch Hollywood films. And I would say that probably...
Pretty much 99%.
Yeah, almost 100%.
Yeah, almost 100%.
You know, it has to be, right?
To be honest, like everybody knows like Leonardo DiCaprio, for example.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Like Brad Pitt, these
And
big
they shouldn't.
names. Yeah.
And they shouldn't. See, this is the point. They shouldn't. And I'm not being anti-Hollywood. I'm just being naturalistic and real here. Not everyone should know who those people are, but we do. See, the thing is, people start supporting things like social media and the internet, but these things aren't natural, and they're causing a lot of damage in the world. You know, because like if we look at suicide rates in Eastern Asia and this and that, Hollywoodization and westernization in a culture that is foreign from that is causing conflict within an individual's cognition. And this is causing depression, anxiety, and unfortunately suicide. And you can't ignore this. People will ignore this because it doesn't support the narrative.
And economy?
And economy. So if it doesn't support the economy or their own ill-conceived narrative, then they'll just push it to the side and pretend it doesn't exist. And it exists. You know, there are many teenagers and that, children jumping out of buildings and this and that in East Asia. And there's a lot of suicide even in places like India and this and that, because you have westernization coming in and encroaching on the people. So like what you were saying with Hollywood, people watch a version of reality, which is Hollywood's version of reality. And no matter whether you like it or not, you're taking that on board and it's becoming your samskaras. It's becoming your subconscious subliminal imprints. It doesn't matter if you think it's not. You are absorbing it through your eyes and ears. And the nature of the mind is to register it and embed it. And that affects your vasanas, your habits, your tendencies, and your action, which run counter to the culture and the environment that you live in.
Because for me, that solves so many knots that I wanted to release. It's why I always wondered why Korea had become the way it is now. That definitely gives me a lot of answers, I think.
It does. And in just Koreans, for example, not absorbing that other cultures' cultural information, that helps people to live their life more purely and not to have a lot of drama in their mind, especially when we look at social media culture, which is fueled by drama.
Yeah, that creates a lot of schism in the mind, isn't it? Like, especially for Asian people, like they somewhat disrespecting their own culture, and they pursue the media, what media try to support, right? And that's that brings about a lot of psychological problem.
Yes, definitely, and that's where we have to be completely apprehensive of what other cultural information is coming in through the eyes and ears. And, you know, this lends into fasting the mind, right? One of the points of fasting the mind, my book, and that practice in general, is to not allow that sort of external stimuli to encroach on your subconscious, because that's going to affect the way you behave in the world. And it's going to affect your whole nervous system, the whole way that you are in the world. And so you have to be very mindful of that. And this is why I would like actually a lot of people who are listening and watching, try this practice just for 1 week. Don't watch any Hollywood films. Don't watch any television shows. And don't absorb any media. And see what happens after 1 week. And I'm saying this for Americans as well who are listening, because a lot of people who listen are from America. I don't want you to absorb anything American. Nothing American.
So that means like no TV, no phone.
No phone.
Maybe just reading books.
Read a book that you want to read.
Yeah.
Meditate. Learn to enjoy a walk in nature.
Yeah.
And see what happens after a week.
Eat some exotic food.
It actually only takes 24 hours. But when you do it for a week, it's completely transformative, because like your mind is not riddled with dramas. Your mind is not riddled with like hyperactivity. It's not subtly influenced by like something on the news or something that happened in a film and this and that. So then you can realize how much that reality is guiding your life. And that reality is external. It's not who you are intrinsically. It's actually, though people would say that's the culture in America, it's only been there for, Hollywood and that's only been around for like 80 or so years, 100 years. It's not like it's something that's been intrinsically there forever. So avoid all of that and see, that's a practice I want everyone to do who are listening and watching this. Because you and I know the effects of that, because we live away from this a lot, even though we're in Australia at the moment. When we go back to Asia, even more so, we will be more disconnected from the media and social media and so forth and so on.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that how we spend so much time away from this westernized world.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
That, like majority of time that we've been together, we were traveling, right?
Yeah.
And we've been in numerous countries and experienced different things. And
yeah.
Majority of time that we spend in Thailand and India, Nepal, usually.
Yeah.
So usually those countries, the people over there are very psychologically healthy, sane people. And to being around by people like that is such a relief.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And we definitely got a lot of influence by those cultures, so that we try to cultivate the good culture inside the house as well.
Yeah,
like,
of course.
right?
Yeah. Well, we know how beneficial it is.
Yeah.
You know, and you and I were never very, what do I say, individualistically driven people. So like, and we were very, we never fit with our place of origin. So when we came across a lot of the more ancient traditions, then that's what felt more natural and right, actually, like being humble, being more innocent, not pretending you know everything and so forth and so on is actually quite a relief. And being around, like you said, surrounded by people like that is even more of a relief, because then you can have more authentic conversations that are not based on opinion or gossip and so forth. It's just based on like it's not even idle chit-chat. It ends up being like something more meaningful and deep with that individual. And it can just be with, like, for example, a chaiwala, right? Like we have a lot of friends who are chaiwalas in India, and like we'll just have like, it might seem like a meaningless conversation, but there's a lot of heart in the conversation. People think it's meaningless because we're not talking about someone, we're not talking about politics or opinions. But the exchange of energy and the transaction is much more pure.
Yeah, when we were talking about the Hollywood films and whatnot, I thought it's kind of funny that, like, for example, a lot of people in South Korea will know very well about what's happening in, like, specifically like New York City or London or these mega big cities in the West. They will know very well about what's happening over there, right? But they wouldn't know what's happening right around where they are.
They wouldn't know what's happening in Busan, for example.
Yeah, exactly. In just in your neighborhood, really, because that's not their interest. It's not their. It's not something that they find it,
It's not interesting,
fun.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
There's not enough drama going on.
yeah. But when I studied philosophy when I was in high school, right, I had like a strong attraction towards especially Laotian and Zhuangzian, right? And when I came across the knowledge, it just seemed to be so truthful and just right. I felt right, right? And since Korea is an Asian country, and I would just wonder why things became the way it became, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And where is that innocence? Where is that trust? Where is that like a communal harmony and whatnot? And isn't it bizarre that I found that when I left Korea,
Yeah.
when I went to India, when I went to these countries, that's where I found that like a respect and innocence and pure love for each other, pure care for each other, this kind of stuff. It's very disappointing thing, and I think it's kind of shameful as well.
Well, especially because Korea is fundamentally a collectivist. They come from the collective, the holistic cognition. So it is disappointing in that sense, especially because their culture should still be built around that.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be built on an artificial product. A foreign culture that's based on individualism. It just should never happen. You don't see, for example, Western cultures taking on holistic cultural.
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't happen, right? Like, you don't see America going whole-scale Hindu. Like, it's just not going to happen. But that's what it would be like, right? Yeah. It would be very strange. Like, America just went full-blown Hindu. Might be great for them. But that's not going to happen. But it happened in Korea. And it's happening in other Asian countries because of the misunderstanding that this foreign culture is actually best. But it's not. It's not best, and it doesn't. And because there's not a deeper understanding of cognition, they don't understand how this is going to affect actually their lives, their immediate lives, and actually their inward life. Because there's going to be a conflict there. The reason why there's a conflict in places like Korea on the inside of people is because they have an individualistic culture superimposed onto a holistic cognition. Doesn't work that way. It's never worked that way, actually.
It only brings much more hypocritical people, very cunning people. Very
yes.
like always like try to like strategize what you can get out of that person, and always like something like ulterior motive behind your head. Always.
Yeah, 100%, and that's the danger. That's the danger. One of the benefits is that in saying what I said before is that a lot of even though a lot of Westerners don't take it this way, but a lot of the good thing about is that Eastern spirituality and philosophy is starting to have a bit of a boom and it has been for a while in the West. The problems arise when they are culturally appropriated, like I said with the Buddhism before, when people couldn't accept karma, and that's something that I hope in the West gets worked out over time. There may be a certain resistance there temporarily because of the individualistic cognition in conflict with a holistic system. For example, all Eastern spiritual traditions are a holistic system. They're not an individualistic system because they are based on that the individual doesn't really exist, and the individual doesn't exist. We know that, and anyone who listens in and to this for long enough, we've been talking about that for forever and a day. The persona is a temporary phenomenon. It's not really who you are intrinsically. Problems arise when we identify with this persona, which in itself is limited, and which causes conflict in the world. So you have to identify with that which is real, the Atman, which is Brahman, or what have you, the Buddha nature within you. And so that understanding will arise, hopefully further down the track when people start to realize, especially in the West, when people start to realize in the West that these systems are holistic, and they are designed for you to down-regulate your sense of self so you can feel more connected to the world around you.
Again, that's to also bring our perspective to the relational-based
Yes.
thinking,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Instead of thinking like a very independent way of thinking.
Yes.
Everything is in relationship.
Yes.
Like we are related to this immediate reality,
Yeah.
the same, and a personal relationship is the same thing, like with between the individual, the family, friend, or whoever.
Yes.
Based on the relational perspective.
Yes.
When you see things that way, things gonna be shown very differently
Yeah.
to all of us, I think.
100%. 100%. That's part and parcel of the holistic cognition is
Yeah.
the relational aspect. Whereas, like, for example, in holistic cognition, relationships and context have value. Individualistic categories and objects have value. They're completely two different ways of seeing the world, two different worldviews. The irony is that the individualistic cognition is far more peculiar and far more actually new and unique than the holistic cognition.
Somewhat like unnatural.
It's hard to say if it's even unnatural, but it's I guess the focus and the application of that function of the mind is what's unnatural.
Right.
So we all have that aspect of our cognition, but the focus and the application of that.
What drives that way of thinking?
Yeah, and us as Westerners residing in that all the time is what's unnatural. And this lends into Joseph Henrich's work when we look at, especially his new book, The Weirdest People in the World. Weird here being an acronym for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. And Henrich's basically a genius, right? Like, and again, I have no problem in saying that because I don't care he's a great teacher. So
he is just such an amazing scholar. Yeah.
So, and in his work, he lays out a pretty solid case that weird people are the most peculiar in the world and the most new in the world. So if you are a Westerner, you are likely Western educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. Doesn't matter what race
where
or
you've come
where
from.
Yep. Doesn't matter. You are likely a weird person. Right. And the weird people are actually the minority of the world. The majority of the world are holistic.
And those minority people are the one that
running the narrative.
Top of the chain.
Top of the chain, yeah. Running the world's narrative. So all of this BS between left and right and politics and morality, and this is all being driven by, and why a lot of people can't understand Eastern spirituality, because they're the ones running the narrative, right? So if they're running the narrative, when you come across things like Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Jainism, Sikhism, whatever, they completely condemn it, and it's like the leftists beat up on Hinduism, which is completely ridiculous, and they have a lack of understanding of actually what Hinduism is and what it means and to Indian people. So, and that's an insensitive approach that's coming from, again, a Western educated, industrialized, rich and democratic perspective onto a completely foreign cognition and tradition, and thinking your version of reality is the best. But your version of reality is an individualistic version of reality. That's the thing, right? And so, and this is where we get conflicts between China and America and so forth and so on. And I'm not saying that the Chinese government aren't manipulating their population and this and that, but we still have a conflict between holistic cognition and individualistic cognition. And the minority, being the weird people, are the ones running the world's narrative, saying, look at what India and China and these places are doing. They're wrong, right? Their version of secularism and democracy and so forth and so on is not like ours. This is wrong. Who's to say you're right? And who are you? And who are you to police the world? You're policing people's minds to think a particular way, and your way of thinking is the minority and actually new and peculiar. It's the result of a certain way of living.
At odds to the rest of the world.
At odds to the rest of the world. It's the result of a certain way of affluence and living in the world. It's not the way most of the world are.
Maybe this might relate to something what you're saying. I mentioned this when we just having a conversation the other day, how Alan Watts were saying there are two models of universe. The one is a ceramic model, and the other is fully automatic. So the ceramic model of the universe is based on Book of Genesis. So things are made, and so from outside in type of thing. You chiseled the things to keep in a certain shape and to maintain that way. Is a ceramic model of universe. The other is fully automatic. Fully automatic means what? Tree grows, the soil, the water goes in, and the sun, it grows. So it's from inside out.
Inside out, yeah. Organic reality.
Organic reality, yes. So things as they are, and they operate organically, and it always works perfectly. So the people who believe a ceramic model of universe, it's a belief. They want to believe it that way. But what would say that fully automatic model of universe is how it is, how naturally things are. We came from our parents, and we grow up, and this is not something that we manufacture it, right?
Can't control it.
Unless it's a computer or a robot or something. but it's completely out of our control. It's not artificial. It's organic and completely natural. So everything works that way. What we, the Earth rotate around the sun, moon rotate around the Earth. It's not in our hands. It's out of our control. It just what it does, what this solar system does, right? That is to say the universe is fully automatic. So fully automatic is how it is. That's real, and that's the truth. Whereas the people who would suppose the ceramic model of universe is they just want to believe in it. That's just a belief, and they think that is the way it is.
Well, Watts would actually say that even the people who try to believe in the ceramic model of the universe, deep down, as you can tell from their actions and their words, they believe in the fully automatic model.
And that is the big point of his talk there. They know, these people who want to believe ceramic model know that world is fully automatic, but for some reason they're I don't know, they want to defend their agenda, their ego,
their ideology.
Yes. They can't let that go, right? So they want to believe in the ceramic model, but they do know deep down that our world functions as fully automatic.
Because just have a look around you. And that's the thing. Like, that's, again, where the differences between Western religions and Eastern spirituality come to a head, right? Because Western religions are based on the ceramic model of the universe. God created the world. It's, Jesus is the son of a carpenter, right? So it's a created world. There's a God who created the universe. Where in Eastern spirituality, the universe is an organism. The universe grows. And this is why there was a study where they would ask Western children, where the children would ask their mother in the West and in the East. And the differences between, they would ask this, right? The child would ask their mother in the West, how was I made? The child in the East would say, how did I grow? You see the difference? And it's a cognitive difference too. That has to be, we have to understand that those children are thinking that way because of the cumulative set of culture and knowledge that is ingrained into their genetics. This is gene co-culture evolution, right? This is the dual inheritance theory, where the genetic evolution and cultural evolution are in tandem and actually intertwined. And so that's a great point, because if you're trying to understand Eastern spirituality and philosophy and Asian cognition in general, you have to come from what you're saying, the fully automatic model, what Watts was talking about, and you have to be thinking in the sense of a grown universe, like the universe itself is just like a flower, which is growing, and you're growing as a part of it, but you will have your natural decline and death. You will go through your time of Shiva as well. That is coming. We all have that coming to us. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that, you know what I mean? That's just the way it is. That's the fully automatic model. It's about understanding that, coming into alignment with it. And actually, in doing so, that allows you to open your mind and think from a more holistic place.
Right.
Once you put an end to what you were talking about, instead of having a belief in how things are, you need to know how things are. And when you begin to know how things are, the nature of Brahman and Tao, know the non-dual reality around you, this holistic reality that we're all part of, then that unlocks a great virtue and a great realization within you. Similar to enlightenment, right? So, but if you're on the other end of the spectrum, then you're going to come up with questions like, I don't want to believe in karma and reincarnation and Buddhism, and you come up with these culturally appropriated perspectives based on your individual cognition.
So that I could think this way, that the weirdest people, their belief and the way what the agenda they are supporting is fully based on basically the belief. They're kind of deluded by their own belief. Right?
Deluded by their own belief, yeah.
They don't want to see how things really are, just how things are. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
It's divorced from nature.
Yeah.
It's an artificial product. Again, when you have your whole philosophy, social structure, culture, and that based on belief and the beliefs of humans as opposed to how nature actually is, then that runs counter to you're going to always be in conflict with the natural world. Hence the world that we have around us, right? We have a reality where humans are slowly in conflict with the natural world because we've bought into this belief. We have a belief in a species-centric reality where humans are all that is important to this world, as opposed to, like, if we look at it from an Eastern perspective, a human being is no more important than an ant. And that's a humbling philosophy, because when you understand that you're no more important than an ant, then you can start to function with nature as a part of it, because ants are as important as us. Fleas are as important as us. Gnats are as important as us. Elephants, anything, are as important as us. But we're creating a reality where it's very individualistic and species-centric. So then we leave a desert behind until we will go, and as George Carlin said, we will have our time. He said it in a very cynical manner, but we will have our time, and the earth will go on. The earth will renew itself, and new life will be born. That's just the way it is. Unless we understand what we're talking about, then we can symbiotically live with the world in harmony with it.
Yeah, because the human species is, if you want to look at it that way, like you say, it's no different any other species. But for some reason we want to, again, I guess that's kind of completely Christian the way of thinking, that how we are top of the chain, that we can rule over nature.
Rule over nature.
Right. But once upon a time, millions of years ago, we were living in savannah, trying to survive. And we had all this natural ability, but because of evolution of culture, and us being very social animals, we have the world that we have now. That doesn't make us a superior species than other species, right?
No, of course not.
Then we have to acknowledge that.
Well, because of that perspective, like what you said, because of the perspective of the ceramic model and because of this individualistic cognition and so forth and so on, that there's the belief in the conquest of nature.
Yeah.
So but that's just part and parcel with that cognition, is that you are trying to conquer nature because you have a species-centric viewpoint and your individualistic viewpoint, as opposed to the other spectrum, which is you're trying to live with nature, in harmony with it. And this comes back to us evolving from a natural species to a cultural species. Problems have happened evolving into a cultural species. But what's important, especially within Eastern spirituality and philosophy, is the cultural knowledge that's accumulated through time is there for you to live with nature. You see? Whereas the other spectrum, the individualistic Western cognition, is an accumulative set of knowledge based on self-interest and how to conquer nature and how to keep our species at the top of the food chain. And that is why the ancient cultures are important, right? That accumulative set of knowledge that can allow us to live in harmony with the world, find our true nature and our connection to one another and the whole entire universe, right? Like that's the importance, especially of Eastern spirituality and philosophy, that cultural knowledge that's been passed down. And that's been around for who knows how long, you know.
I mean, that's what combined the people all around Asia.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe it's not a surprising thing. It's still going. It's enduring culture, a place like India,
yeah, for sure.
especially, which is actually big relief. The good news that we still have those places that they, keep their ancient cultures and traditions, and they still follow very strongly, which is big relief.
And it's nothing against the Western cognition. It's like what I said earlier, just before, is that the over-application of that particular individualistic analytical perspective is what causes trouble and conflict in the world. That's just the nature of it. And that's actually not our natural cognition. Our natural cognition is holistic. And the differences between both is that Eastern traditions were based on that. Western traditions were based on the individualistic perspective, the analytical perspective. Hence, we have this ceramic model of the universe, separation between man and God, so forth and so on.
I guess the biggest problem is that with that is we emphasize the core cognition.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Of course, yeah.
We're not paying too much attention to what hot cognition does.
Well, all of the hot cognitive naturalness that is being suppressed in Western society is why humility, innocence, respect, honor, all of these virtues are being are actually condemned and actually laughed upon, and actually you are sort of thought of in a way like you don't need any of that because you won't get ahead in life. It's still a self-interested version of reality, see. But as we know, and probably everyone listening and watching, is that when you do align more with those, that's when your life becomes more alive and vibrant, and actually you become more peaceful. When you're a driven person and you're using people for your own means and to get ahead and so forth and so on, and you could care less about anyone or anything else, you can only have stress and suffering and anxiety from that sort of place. There's no two ways about it.
I mean, when we give to people, gives us things and share things with people without asking anything, that we all feel such pure pleasure and joy from doing that. And there's something about it that is intrinsic within human being, right?
Yeah.
And that's where we need to turn to.
Well, exactly. Well, I've had a lot of questions like, because my channel here doesn't reach a wide audience and so forth and so on, and people ask me, what keeps you going? And it's like, because you're providing this service for free. And it's like, but I almost like, because this is my work, I almost have to do it. But I love sharing and giving the knowledge to away to people, and it makes me extremely happy when you find people who are sincere about Eastern spirituality and philosophy, who come across it and know that what's being spoken here is the authentic teachings, and there's no new age sort of garbage infused within it, and so in giving you get a lot back, actually, more so, instead of taking. Like someone actually wrote a comment about that once upon a time. The Western mentality of taking is like an individualistic perspective, right? Because you're taking, you're acquiring things for yourself, you're building your own little empire. Whereas, as you know, with Eastern spirituality, it's about dissolving an empire and about dissolving yourself and gaining more trust in the world, trust in your neighbors, trust in other people, even though they may not be trustworthy. But the ability to trust, even in those circumstances, is beneficial to you. Of course, keep a critical eye if people are trying to take you down the garden path. But as a human, you will know that. So it's more about harnessing that trust in life and of other people, and realizing your intrinsic connection to everyone and everything else, actually.
That big thing in Eastern spirituality is what selflessness, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you act selfless, and you give more, and that's where the intrinsic happiness arises within you.
Yes.
And I don't know, I must have read from in a book or something that karma is literally, we know this, that what happened to you is what you did. So it's not necessarily just a cause and effect.
No.
What happened to you and what you did.
Yeah.
And what you do is what will happen to you.
Yeah.
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 So that's one of the things in Eastern spirituality. The cause is the effect and the effect is the cause. So there's actually the reason why people think cause and effect is because that's from a dualistic perspective.
Yeah.
From a non-dualistic perspective, cause is effect and effect is cause. There's no separation. So like you said, what you give is what you get, and what you get is what you give.
Yeah.
It's this sort of mentality.
Yeah.
And then the thing is that people over-rationalize that perspective, right? Now, but what about this? This happened to me and this and that. And it's like you're still thinking about it self-interestedly from your perspective, and you're not allowing the set of knowledge you're not allowing yourself to understand what's being said here, actually.
Right.
And that's one of the big problems that people have today, that I've talked a lot about today, is about the deference towards other knowledge and teachers and this and that, to actually understand what's being said. Stop superimposing your own experience on this, because if you're doing that, you can never learn from anybody.
Yeah. You need to just wipe out all your subjectivity, opinions, ideas, and conditioning, everything.
Because people are often in the bad habit of, but this happened to me, and this, and this, and this, and that. We could unpack why that happened to you, and this and that, or you can just try to understand what's being said in this set of knowledge, and understand it from its perspective instead of your perspective, and see if there's a remnants of truth in it. Stop seeing the world through your own rose-colored glasses. Take your glasses off and see the world objectively. How many times have I had emails where people say, you did one video on this and then one video on that, and you said this and that. My role in doing this is to see the knowledge objectively, not subjectively. So I don't understand how people don't come to the knowledge objectively. If you come into everything subjectively, you'll never learn anything. No. You won't learn anything because
you're not ready to learn anything.
You're not ready to learn anything. You're not innocent enough. You have to come to it objectively and see it for what it is. The reason why I, for so long, have learned, especially the three great traditions of the East, is because I came to all of three of them objectively and never, for example, one of the first traditions I was involved with was Advaita Vedanta. I never came from Advaita Vedanta when I was being schooled in Taoism, and I didn't overlay the Advaita Vedanta. You just come to it objectively. Of course, you're going to see similarities, because there's many similarities with all the Eastern traditions.
That's when you thoroughly understand all each tradition's on its own merit. Yeah. Then you can put together and
of course,
see.
Yeah. That's for further down the track.
Yes, that's later.
Later on, And so you have to see it objectively. You can't come to it. And this is, again, what you and I have been explaining to people a lot, is don't come to our podcast or my other videos and this and that with your own prior agenda or your own cultural conditioning. You have to see this information objectively and the knowledge objectively. As soon as you say, I don't agree, or I don't agree with what he or she said, or my opinion is this, you're already on the wrong track.
You kind of missed the point.
You missed the point, because you're not just absorbing it objectively and seeing if there's a remnants of truth in it.
Yeah, when you hear it, you just kind of sit and let it just assimilate within your mind and see if that's something beneficial for yourself or not. You need to look at it objectively and take your time to see it clearly. Right.
Because I was taught in the traditional Eastern knowledge, like when you listen to a master or you're in a setting like that, you have to take them as the authority. That's actually how the environments are set up. You know, like when I was first involved with Advaita Vedanta, the master, you have to take them as the authority. Even though with my Western conditioning, this and that, to begin with may have went, oh man, I don't really, man, he's gone mad or something. You know what I mean? But when you take it on board objectively, then you understand why they say that, because then you can actually start to learn properly from the teacher or the teachings, instead of like overlaying your opinion on this and that, because again, your opinion is based on conditioning, based on your cultural conditioning, based on your immediate conditioning from schooling and your family and so forth and so on. You're never going to learn. You're never going to learn.
You come to Eastern spirituality to get all of that stuff out the door.
Out the door, yeah.
Don't bring it with you.
Yeah. You got to wipe your mind clean.
Yeah.
Actually, the teachings will wipe your mind clean, but you have to come to the teachings like without this habit of being I mean, I don't understand that triggeredness stuff that people go through these days, but being emotionally like offended by whatever's being said, or you know, you have to come to it, just listen, like you, in some sense, come to it and listen like you did when you were in first grade of primary school, where you just listen to the teacher. And if you spoke up to the teacher, what happens? I mean, I spoke up to the teacher many times. I found out what happens, you know. So you have to come to it like that. You really do. You have to come to it innocently, listen. And look, if you don't vibe with the tradition, you can easily walk away. There's no problem. If you don't vibe with what you and I are speaking about here on the podcast, you can easily just change to something else. That's the option you have.
When I was in the forest monastery in northern Thailand, first time, first thing you learn is that when you come to Dhamma hall, which is meditation hall, you bow 3 times in front of the master monk or teacher monk, whatever. And a lot of people didn't seem that was kind of comfortable to them. Well,
it's not. Of
course not, because you never done anything like that to bow to someone, not even bow to your own parents, right?
No, people don't do that. No.
Yeah, so it would be a bit uncomfortable at the beginning, but most of people, I think, they take it as a part of teaching, which is the right way to go about, and they practice it. Not necessarily that you are lowering yourself to somebody. I think you're lowering kind of your ego down almost. To me, that's how what it symbolizes.
That's what it does symbolize.
Yeah, because it's a not comfortable thing to do, but you're from lowering yourself, you let your ego down a little bit, and it's part of the teachings, right? But again, some people didn't feel comfortable with it from beginning to the end, so they just leave in a few days' time. Again, that's fine. That's their own decision. So, yeah, but that's something that we need to, understand.
Yeah, because when you have to bow 3 times in front of the master monk, because we're not accustomed to doing that, right? So your ego feels that pain.
Yeah, that's
on
right.
the inside. There's a pain. And the good thing about that pain, and I've mentioned this in the podcast before, is that that's your ego being destroyed. It's slowly being destroyed. Now, if you stay in the monastery long enough, when you bow 3 times, it becomes like just taking a crap in the morning. It's something that you just do. And to be honest, our true self has no problem bowing to a master like that, because it knows that this master follows the way of the Buddha. And if you follow the way of the Buddha, man, Shanti, you should show even more respect. You should be doing a Tibetan bow. So, that's the nature of reality. And the problem is as we've witnessed with Westerners in monasteries, and we've been in a few monasteries where people have problem with bowing, and they form their own congregation of group in the monastery, like almost against the monks, which is very disrespectful. like, because they don't understand the whole. And look, if you don't understand, just leave the monastery.
Yeah, you shouldn't be there.
You shouldn't be there. Don't be disrespectful to the monks and to the monastery in general. You shouldn't be there, and you're not ready for that sort of teaching. You're not ready to lower your ego, to destroy your ego, essentially. You know, so, and that becomes a problem with individualistic cognition, is when we never bow and show salutations to anyone. Oh, we got to save face always. We have to always save face. You know, actually, no relationships can work, right? Why do intimate relationships work? Because both people in the relationship have to, in some sense, bow and submit to their partner for certain things. That's how you have harmony with each other. You and I have experienced this together. And we're not talking bowing literally, we're talking more metaphorically speaking here. Like, you know, you have to adapt to people's certain tendencies and vasanas. And then that's what actually allows life to go on. And that's what the teaching is in the monastery. That deference of lowering yourself to a master allows you to be humble and stay humble, which hopefully you take out of the monastery and bring into the world, because we need that, right? We need more humble people. We need more people who are centered and grounded. That's how life can flourish and move on.
Yeah, we gotta be the example that we want to see, right?
Exactly.
So that's how you also change the people immediately around you, and that's how you can create the healthy culture around you, right?
And this bowing 3 times mentality, if you want to harness this holistic perspective of deference just in ordinary life, practice just listening to people. Practice just observing reality without engaging and thrusting your opinion into a situation, engaging in something that you don't need to actually engage in, and watch your mind and watch your tendency to want to do these things. Practice a certain element of vairagya, of non-reactiveness. When that tendency comes in, like, oh, I really don't like what this guy is saying, put the foot on the brake.
You gotta catch it before you
make fool of yourself, basically. So that's an application of the bowing 3 times to the monk, is be humble to the world in general. Allow the world to do what it does. Don't engage, and just listen to people. Even listening to someone that you don't agree with necessarily, if it's a friend or a family member or a colleague at work or something like that. Just listening to them and not fighting them. And if they ask for your opinion and you are practicing this, just say, I don't really have an opinion, but what you said is good. And that's it.
Yeah.
They may be confused and think, well, this guy he doesn't function like a normal person. But you don't want to actually function like a normal person, because the normality that person probably is projecting is like gossip or being opinionated and so forth and so on.
Yeah, triggering to create more dramas.
Yes. So you want to go on the opposite, because your focus is on the natural elements of life, the natural cognition, which is humility, trust, compassion, forgiveness, trust, honor and respect. They are the more natural. They are the natural intrinsic values that we don't even have to cultivate, because they're naturally there. They're just been suppressed because we've brought into a cultural system that promotes drama, violence, separation. We need to revert back to the more holistic cultural knowledge that we've accumulated.
And those qualities of ourselves, the pure qualities of ourselves, is not something that we need to cultivate. It's already there, right? Like you say, just been suppressed. And when we just clean out all the garbage in our own mind, then it'll just come to the surface naturally. Naturally.
Well said. And that's the danger in. Well, the danger in destroying all these ancient cultures is the destruction of what you just said. It doesn't come naturally, it's not there. Well, it's there, but it's eclipsed by a bunch of other things, especially with the modern culture that we are developing with the online world, which is definitely not humble compassionate, forgiving.
Completely opposite.
They're completely opposite. Self-interested and mischievous.
Yeah.
People are behaving in a way that, as Confucius said, you can learn a lot about people by the way that they behave by themselves. And what you're seeing is a lot of people with a certain psychopathy in the world because they're behaving in a way that's not harmonious and not natural to the world.
Yeah.
So this is the importance of maintaining those ancient traditions to keep those intrinsic natural values alive, those Eastern traditions. So hope you guys enjoyed today, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.